Good day and welcome, one and all, to the first episode in this series I want to make concerning the polar configuration in the electric universe theory. I wasn't quite sure where to start, so I'll just start with a lot of the symbolism and a quick introduction and see how that goes. My goal with this series is to lay out my best interpretation of the electric universe, polar configuration, evolution, and model, and relate that to symbolism in cultures, religions, myth, spirituality, and occultism throughout time and across the world. If you're an alternative researcher or just new coming onto this, you have to accept the fact or the idea that you have to branch off ideas from main dogmas and accepted science. So with the electric universe, branching off from gravity finds this model of planetary alignments. I want to try to explain them to you and all of their symbolism, and we'll get into the science about it and evolution about it in subsequent episodes. But for good posterity and the science behind it, with planets connecting invisibly with currents, and such alignments may be possible if we can think at branching ideas. And if we look at all the current data coming in through our solar maximum this year and all of our activity, we have to come to an awakening that everything is connected with electricity. And so this makes us have to look deep inside and question the connectivity of us to the sky and the galaxy and the stars around us, and the connectivity to us and the energy we use every day in our homes, in our bodies, and to get around. It's all connected from every planet, and I never was much to believe in a lot of astrology. Well, at least not in my adulthood, but nowadays a lot of things are adding up to seeing that there are ways in which these magnetic connections and interferences across large scales do affect our bodies, and they change over time and have cycles that we are not even fully sure of. No one lives long enough, supposedly, to see a lot of these. But we have evidence that our ancestors built monuments to the dance of the planets and the stars in the sky. And they tracked it very, very well, and its effects on agriculture. And as a warning, I like to do a lot of comparative imaging, so I'll put a lot of images side by side and have you do your own comparison. Let me know if that's too much or if I move images too fast. Here is a representation from a very famous symbol, I think, from one of my favorite comic books by a very awesome band. Let me know in the comments if you recognize that. And this other picture of Saturn, I think, is a little off because we would be inside the rings if we were that close, comparatively. Unless we were at the equator at a certain distance. But yeah, as you can see, gas giants are very big dynamos in electromagnetic energy. It is very well documented, least to say. And so we take a look, all these currents, all these magnetic fields, and we look at the planets with rocky surfaces and their magnetic differences, and obviously it's volcanoes. There's this giant one, there's these three, and there's the giant scar, and that's all in one area, almost like a machine or a cathode and anode reaction. And you see the negative, positive discharge and excavating. So that's what I'm seeing. So if you see anything else, or if you want me to look at something else, fine. But I'm seeing a lot of correlations. And here is a couple of images of this the atmosphere of Venus. Notice the Coriolis effect in it, and here's a surface atmosphere comparison. I believe this is Venus. So we look around at all the planets and we see evidence of electromagnetic bodies and auras and evidence. This is what I'm calling it. I don't know what else to call it, but in this electric universe model configuration, they're imagining the planets at scale and the effects that their electromagnetic fields would have with each other. And so let's go along with this branching idea, this branching paradigm, and I want to try to explain how this all worked to my best interpretation, to the supposed knowledge that I have ascertained, gleaned. Because yet again, I know nothing, yet I am entirely intrigued. So we have the very common form of the polar configuration. We have Saturn, Venus, and Mars here. So these are the ones I'm going to focus on for the remainder of this video, and I'm going to interpret it symbolically with a lot of pictures of interpretations of gods and goddesses and a lot of symbols along the way. Now, supposedly this configuration sat atop the North Pole, so it would have been centered in the north sky where the North Star is. And for one, I can certainly see the invocation of being in the center of the universe amongst the gods. Here's a depiction of the plasma radiance, plasma beams, whatever you want to call them, coming off of Venus to Saturn. And this is the symbol it was related to in Babylonian myth, and it reminds me of a lot of other symbols. But my purpose is to create a compass, as it were, of these symbols. And we're going to start with Saturn. Saturn was the god of time and agriculture. I believe this was because, according to electric universe theory, its position in the sky would create a crescent, which would appear to rotate with the turning of the Earth every day. Now then, this crescent would wax and wane with the seasons and the time of the year, like the moon, on a yearly basis instead of a monthly basis. You can imagine in the winter, it would be pretty bright and illuminated, and in the summer, it would be a tiny sliver. Because in the winter, the south side of Saturn would be lit up by the sun, just like our south side would be in the midnight sun. We can begin to imagine why the rim of Saturn waxing and waning would seem like a scythe. And if you extend a branch of thought, we can postulate that the water bearer Aquarius and the ram Aries, always depicted with Saturn, would represent Mars and Venus. Also, many gods, Saturn included, and his other interpretations, are said to devour other gods or their own children. I must conclude it must have been terrifying and awe-inspiring to witness what would have culminated in these events until they stabilized. But either way, Venus and Mars were bound to Saturn, and I think we see this in a lot of other mythologies. If any viewers can tell me what the deal is with Odin's eye, because there seems to be a lot of different gods who shapeshift and play with these different ideas on configurations. So on a branch in our theoretical exploration of the electric universe configuration, mouthful, we come across Venus, and supposedly it lit up within this polar configuration as a slight sun. And perhaps it could have invoked many different ideas of gods or goddesses within its inclusion. The crescent always seems to be reminiscent of cows or bulls. And it also reminded me of the Native American white buffalo lady. Take a second to pause on this or any other images you need to reflect on, and just pause and think. Any time is a good time to reflect. Now we're going to look at some interesting current patterns with plasma. Take with it what you will, but a lot of these disabled plasma forms remind me a lot of stuff that I see in alchemy. And it even looks like just someone waving their arms. Wacky tube man, inflatable arms, you know. A kundalini, medicine staff, kachina dancers, so much comes to mind. Again, pause, reflect any time. What you're seeing isn't what we're used to seeing, so it's very, very, very common to be caught up in the bizarre and uncanny. And here we have how it reminds me of this spiral light event, supposedly happened in the Norwegian area. And can anyone take a guess of what this reminds me of? Very common alchemical search pictures and the Pharaoh's hat. Bet you weren't gonna guess that, right? No, what does it also look like? I'm not very sure, but I'm not very confused. I'm just branching here, looking for some of that genosis fruit. And, I should probably do what I'm told to do and just kind of research this a bit before I jump to some conclusions here. But I think after a while you'd find that some people might disagree. Well, I guess we don't really know about that. But this is theoretical. We've never seen this before. We're branching and it's uncanny, right? Now, I don't really want to talk too much for this next part because what we're about to see is a symphony, as this flower of what this configuration can unfold and have in store for us and inspire. It is purely theoretical, so please do not take offense in anything you may see, but I want the symbolism and the icons to really speak for themselves in the imaginative branching possibilities of the electric universe theory. Now I know I was going to be quiet, but I had to move things around to interject at this point here, and my observations that the harmonic convergence from the Legend of Korra has a lot of similarities to do with the electric universe constellation configuration. We see a lot of old world references too as the gang searches the desert for Wang Xingtong's library. They climb down through a portal hole. The ceiling looks like a window. It reminds me of this very uncannily. And the Hindu mythology itself seems very well preserved. It was thought to have just said to have just walked out of the jungle mysteriously one day. The Last Airbender in the Legend of Korra series is based off of a lot of Hindu mythology. The Avatar cycle is based off of the Avatar cycle of Lord Vishnu, who comes to bring balance. Now, our whole branching configuration is not complete without Mars. Now, with all the symbolism we've already integrated into this configuration, Mars now acts as a catalyst, thus the god of war. Okay, and we look at depictions, we can see him here in the sky with a ram, probably representing Aries, Mars, the constellation, and Scorpio, interesting, representing Orion and Gaia, the goddess. So we see him above Earth, up here, with his spear, and a lot of the times he's associated with a golden shield. But here he is, Aries. Could it be that they followed this god and its path into war, destruction, or chaos? Who knows how he played a part in balancing this configuration. Supposedly he was very unstable, coming back and forth to the center and closer to us, changing in size. His chariot. And a pillar of light would come down if we came too close, like a plasma beam, exchanging material between Mars and wherever on Earth it seems to be responding to. And I just wonder if this was cyclical and if it provoked cycles of war and unrest and chaos. Well, we have our legends and artists and what they interpret from the legends across the lands. So we have to ask ourselves, is there a certain environment that our planet, or all the planets in our solar system, our whole solar system has to be in to align with this, to let this, to have the situation go on? Perhaps when we get closer to a higher energy or magnetic tether at the center of our filament, who knows? I'd like to know if there's any symbolic or artful representation of what you see here today that I haven't shown. Warning, this may be hazardous information, but nobody knows what it would look like exactly, but here are some interpretations of filaments discharging between two planets close to our proximity. Indeed, I can't help but to find, anytime I plug in the electric universe eyes to any religion, myth, or fantasy, or just so much of our stories and myth making, just so based on something we can't explain. And I thought I was done with spirits and the apparitions and fantasy, but this electric universe just opens it up so more to a different interpretation. It's like a multiverse, a multi-branching theory. No electric universe exploration is complete without a stickman on stone, a supposed plasma instability burst, a bell shape, however you want to call it. Many interpretations for such a miraculous or catastrophic event. Who knows how this may have ended life or promoted its growth. There's so many possibilities. Alrighty, now's the time where we squeeze it all down into some more symbology. Now I've tried to condense this down and get this genosis out of the stone for y'all. I'd like to start an open discussion on pillars of light, pillars of plasma, and connectivity and currents, and their symbolism here, because once you see something, see it everywhere, you can't stop seeing it. I see it now, and I can't not. I'm sure many of you might have come across these or not, but I see much from the religion and ruins in our past here. We have the ruins, the Pillar of Pompeii in Alexandria. Now I've got to do some artistic overlays to show you the symbolism I'm going at here. So just bear with me, but the Sphinx represent the two crescents on the side, and Isis and her sister, and then Saturn sits atop of the pillar. The pillar, of course, would have been north, so it would accommodate the northern polar configuration. Now, yes, you see what I'm going at. It can get very convoluted very quick. So many symbols, so many meanings, where to place them. So I'm going to step back and I'm going to show a more basic one. So what does this symbol look like here? And I'm just going to let it play. Now this one I'm not too sure how to interpret, but something tells me some people might call it an angry god. Who knows? Let me know what you think. And of course, I thought this was the perfect opportunity to interject star forts and kind of their geological precision, and also mention the way they remind me of the way Central City is laid out from Full Metal Alchemist. And you got to kind of think of how they reboot and remake and recontextualize like popular things that come very close to the truth, and they recontextualize it so that it loses its original context. And I just imagine what else it just goes on to. There's so many old movies and remakes we got to start paying attention to, not just books, and not just because of the critical theories they think that they're worried about. It's really just examples and people's experiences of this that they're getting rid of, and they're always doing it. But that's just my opinion. It was crazy to see a guy in his fish talk about Malta and hardly show any pictures of it or the underground and spin a story. And then I had Paul Cook showing me the real amazing story at Malta. So if you're really interested in star forts, take a look at all those. There's tons I can say, and I'll probably do another video on star forts, but this, I guess, is just an introduction of my favorite star forts so far to compare. Here we have two separated from a lot of land across the realm. One pristine and one what we expect to see in my country. And as any time I ask you to pause and reflect on any of these star forts that might have moved you, and rest assured there are plenty across the land. Find one near you. If you would like to disclaim any of these ideas or branching theories, please go find your nearest star fort, pay a visit there, tell me what you find. Show me pictures, please. Now, for the sakes of all of you wonderful people's time, we get to the crux of the symbology study in Hermeticism. And whether or not you believe that your education or your doctrine is completely correct, I just want you to keep one thing in mind, that things can change. They can change a lot. I believe for the moment we are free to have branching ideas. So in this branch, in this realm, I've come across this picture of the depiction of the plasma in the polar configuration. And it was quite moving, to say the least. Tell me what you think. This is just a theoretical compilation, no different than AI. This was just done with more intention in a human hand. And this is what we were related to seeing today. These halos, these occurrences that happen around the sun and in other instances that we have actually seen and photographed in our digital newfound age. So this is really the only experience we have to relate it to. We weren't here back then, and we really haven't been around for a while. So either we critically disseminate what is handed to us and what we observe, or we keep an open mind and an open heart. We ask questions. We look for correlations, we look for options, and we follow whichever one suits us best. But sometimes, historically, thoughts were crimes. So our ancestors must have left some way, some symbols to access the encaustic records. Some path back to knowing. And indeed there are stories, quite popular ones, I might add, of such visions and revelations lead to revolutions and empires. And that is what I intend to question at the end of this, and show a modern example of what these polar configurations in close proximity might have done to a populace, physically, mentally, electrophysically, magnetically, however you want to describe it. But when you start researching history and religion, everything starts to coalesce. There seems to be a revolving center at the mess of this all. Let's look at Constantine and the Holy Roman Empire and all their symbols and stories. Just take a quick refresher in case you haven't seen or been studying this in a while. Constantine was considered the Holy Roman Empire, and he united the kingdoms and purged paganism and spread Catholicism under Roman rule. He was responsible for all of this giant conglomeration of culture and society under one banner, and truly one of the greatest empires nobody can stop talking about. In case you haven't heard. And it was all after this vision he had of the cross that turned him into a true believer. And many just take that, accept it, and go on. And we must go on because Roman architecture, and it is everywhere. It is a part of us and a part of our being. And this is the explanation we have for it, the hand-waved story of the birth of Roman Catholicism after Christ, supposedly. Anyways, the idea then that such a vision is such moving is not alien to this electric universe model configuration. They coincide so much that people are just so scared, and I can't talk about it to anybody I know. It's just insanity. These people were driven to insanity through war, to unite, to find a purpose. And I want to prove to you that there is reason behind their cause, their reactions to all of this going on, that we may not be seeing or taking into account or taking seriously the implications of these stories and this side story and all the side stories and all the religions you go into. You'll find correlation between what an electric universe eyes would call electromagnetic plasma events. There's many things to describe, anomalies or stuff that could happen. We have no idea what happens during Carrington events. We have no idea what exactly has been correlating to all of the events on the sun this past year and how they will go this next year. And that's the real crux of it, is when I started looking into the solar weather and more myths and legends, historical accounts and data. You start seeing Maya events and all this other solar correlation between weather and electric phenomena, earthquakes, volcanoes, just piles on. So I implore you, do your research, do your homework. But right now I'm going to show you just examples of what you see when you research. Here is the annual model of the solar wind that affects us, and it shows the CMEs coming towards us and the flares. And here is something you really need to pause or go look up yourself. This is how different KP levels and electromagnetic kinetic potential in the atmosphere affects us, our mental states. This is very important. And at the highest levels, you get increased paranoia, insomnia, and all kinds of behavior in people who are sensitive to it. And now I'm going to drill these concepts into a more modern take on an example of this and show you the parallels and comparisons. Very popular show we all love. Now, if I assume you're not familiar with this episode or this show, this giant head comes in to our realm, right beyond our atmosphere, and causes tidal waves, floods, earthquakes, all kinds of crazy catastrophes, right? These giant humanoid heads come in, and it's just insanity. The news reporters are going off, trying to polarize over it, and it just says, show me what you got. Now, if you take into account what the electromagnetic phenomenon could be doing to everybody's mental state and their bodies at this time, we can really see a very predictable behavior pattern start to unfold within these people, especially those more sensitive. There will be no holding back in the symbolism call out. I will just point them out, and since we've discussed most of them, we can just go forward smoothly for the most part. And as we see soon, there's an upheaval of faith, almost the opposite of what Constantine was doing. This is almost like a polarization. Anyway, Principal V decides to head on out and start praying to the heads. He decides, why not? Go figure. A word to the weary though, be wise, because every crisis of faith is an opportunity for more faith, or different faith. Yes, it is indeed a very interesting study on the polarization of faith in decisive catastrophic situations. But anyway, our investigators play a song, and we clear it all up, and they head away. And he who ran out and, supposedly appeased those in control was appraised. Now that the crisis is over and not suffering from any kind of effects or suppression, Francine starts to question things like anybody would logically, right? Yet in a cruel twist of fate, they are soon transported amongst all of the other heads, and their situation is now seeming like it's gonna last longer, and with a lot more effects from all this interference. It's looking like a lot of planets and a lot of heads and a big giant disco ball. We quickly see mass confusion and reverting to authority. And we see a dichotomy of the truth in the situation and other people's attempts to connect or appease to the higher powers. And indeed, it showcases those trying to attempt to assert themselves into religion, spiritual authority positions, and dictating who among them has the right to interpret that and express themselves and their freedoms. They in fact quickly use it as a reason to dispose those who dissonant or do not align. And in a quick symbolism pause and close-up, I really gotta wonder where this principle got these garments. I mean, I am just seeing things, I guess. This is my favorite. Gotta ask why. Anyways, so the kid bails on Doc, so does Ice-T, and so Doc tries to just blurt out something to appease them, but they're not too happy. And Francine and Jerry seem to have come to their senses, and they are being about to let loose for it. J. Fox returns, and the heads are pleased, and it is interpreted as a good omen for the family. They are released. The Department of Defensive and Security unleashes its attack, nonetheless, and the heads are none too pleased, and the principal is challenged. The family is saved, but the whole Earth is in peril now. But all of a sudden, Ice-T appears with a quote from Xmas Story Special, by the way, in a very predictable scene. And finally, the heads announce the ending of their show and the saving of the planet Earth. And it seems this time everybody got the message. A little too late, unfortunately, for the people we saw earlier. And so if you take into account all the electromagnetic effects that could have been going on to these people during this time, it is very safe to assume that afterwards they would deny and quickly want to forget everything that had gone on and how they had acted the entire time. Thus the cycle. Forgetting. Forgetting to remember. Remember to forget. The doors of perception. Where are you going? We're not done. I said the doors were open. We have an after credits scene. Yes, Ice-T returns to his home realm afterwards, where he is greeted and anointed by 3 elders with plasma beams from their staffs into water tea. Sorry. What does this remind you of? After everything we've gone through so far, this savior coming up immediately into a war. In case you didn't pause and look at all the symbols that I fixed or jointed to their places in the scene, we can see more in his home fiction. And with that, I just want to end with one question. One branching question for those of you out there. If you saw something today, and then you go out, and you see other things related to it, other places, you start seeing it everywhere you turn, or when you dig things up, or when you're not even looking. Who knows what dark corner you might be venturing. You might see something reminds you of something you saw today. Whether or not you believe, if you think of that, and you keep seeing it the rest of your life, could you ignore it? what would you do? Please let me know in the comments below, like and subscribe. Have a great day, and I hope I gave you all some kind of compass for what I was talking about here. And stay gold.
Golly, that was sure pretty, huh?
Yeah.
It's like the mist is what's pretty, you know? All gold and silver. Too bad it can't stay like that all the time.
Nothing gold can stay.
Huh?
Nature's first green is gold. Her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaves a flower. But only someone out. Then leaf subsides to leaf. So Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down today. Nothing gold can stay.
Where'd you learn that? That's what I meant.
Robert Frost wrote it. I always remembered it because I never quite knew what he meant by it.